Welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha, a podcast shared by David Roylance. This podcast is dedicated to guiding you to completely eliminate the discontent mind and the suffering it causes by attaining enlightenment. Learn and practice the teachings of Gotama Buddha that will guide you to fully attain a peaceful, calm, serene, and content mind with joy. To support this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha or visit buddhadailywisdom.com, where you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online learning resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Now, here's our teacher to share more.
Sawadee-ka. Hello and welcome to Daily Wisdom, Walking the Path with the Buddha. Today is our Pali Canon and English study group, and we're studying the words of the Buddha. We're in volume 5 of our book series. We're going to be exploring chapters 31 through 40 today. And the way that we do this program is it's more of a study group where students have possibly read before class or they're going to read after class. And now we come together and we just study the words of the Buddha. And then basically after a student will read the chapter, I'm going to share some teachings on that chapter. And then I'm going to open up to whatever questions students have. So if you've been studying these before or you plan to study them after class, this class is just meant to kind of support you in your learning. So welcome to all of you, whether you're joining for the first time or you're joining regularly. If you would like to volunteer to read and you're in Zoom, all you need to do is electronically raise your hand. And the same thing for questions. You can electronically raise your hand or put those in the comment section. For those of you guys that are in YouTube and Facebook, if you would like to ask a question, you can put that into the comment section and I'll be able to see that. So if there's anybody who's in Zoom who would like to volunteer to read this first chapter, just let me know. Looks like Pat. Go ahead, sir.
The noble method is to understand dependent origination. And what is the noble method that he has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom? Here, householder, the noble disciple attends closely and carefully to dependent origination itself thus. When this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. When this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that is eliminated. That is, with ignorance as condition, volitional formations come to be. With volitional formations as condition, consciousness. With consciousness as condition, name and form. With name and form as condition, the 6 sense bases. With the 6 sense bases as condition, contact. With contact as condition, feeling. With feeling as condition, craving. With craving as condition, clinging. With clinging as condition, existence. With existence as condition, birth. With birth as condition, aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair come to be. Such is the cause of this whole mass of discontentedness. But with the remainderless fading away and elimination of ignorance, unknowing of her reality, comes elimination of volitional formations, choices, and decisions. With the elimination of volitional formations, elimination of consciousness. With the elimination of consciousness comes elimination of name and form. With the elimination of name and form comes elimination of the 6 sense bases. With the elimination of the 6 sense bases comes elimination of contact. With the elimination of contact comes elimination of feeling. With the elimination of feeling comes elimination of craving. With the elimination of craving comes elimination of clinging. With the elimination of clinging comes elimination of existence. With the elimination of existence comes elimination of birth. With the elimination of birth comes elimination of aging and death, sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair is eliminated. Such is the elimination of this whole mass of discontentedness. This is the noble method that he has clearly seen and thoroughly penetrated with wisdom. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So this book, Volume 5, is all about the first stage of enlightenment and the teachings that you're going to need to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment, along with all the other parts of Volume 1, Volume 2, Volume 3, and Volume 4 as well. And one of the things that a person who's moving into that first stage of enlightenment needs is they need to be able to understand dependent origination. And this isn't a teaching that you just learn once and and understand it 5 minutes later. This is something that you really need to spend some time with to be able to absorb it and understand it. Sometimes it takes multiple months and even years for people to be able to understand this and gradually walk through it. But it's actually very simple at its core. If you kind of remove any kind of thoughts of complexity and that it should be complex or anything like that, you can actually look at this very simply. So here, this noble method that the Buddha is talking about, that a noble disciple has closely and carefully understood and penetrated, starts out with this simple way of looking at dependent origination. Just kind of, when this exists, that comes to be. With the arising of this, that arises. What the Buddha is talking about is how one thing leads to another that leads to another, right? He's just showing this connection between one thing versus another. So like, because we chose to learn English, we can have conversations. And because we have conversations, we can have friends. And because we have friends, when we need to move to a new house, we can call them and perhaps they would be willing to assist us, right? So the whole reason why we're able to have people assist us to move our house is because we learned English, right? So there's this cause and effect, cause and effect, cause and effect. But also, when this does not exist, that does not come to be. With the elimination of this, that is eliminated. So if we do not learn English, then we cannot have conversations. And if we cannot have conversations, we cannot have friends. And if we don't have friends, when it's time to move to a new house, we don't have anybody that can help us, right? So this is the Buddha showing you that when this does not exist, that does not come to be. So when you don't speak a certain language, then it doesn't come to be that you have friends to help you move, right? So the Buddha is just helping you see this cause and effect in a real simple way. But then he goes into dependent origination, showing you the 12 interlinking steps that's leading to your discontentedness. And of course, your continued rebirth. So while there's all these details here, let's just look at it in summary form. What the Buddha is saying is, with ignorance, there's going to be craving and clinging. And when there's craving and clinging, there's going to be sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. This is what you learned as part of the 3 poisons or the 3 unwholesome roots, that when we talk about craving, anger, and ignorance, that craving, the longing, yearning, the anger, the hostility, and the bitterness, and the ignorance is the unknowing of true reality. One of the things that I say is that while we call it craving, anger, and ignorance, it's really because of ignorance that craving and anger continues in the mind. That's what the Buddha is helping you to see here in dependent origination, that the whole reason why you experience this discontentedness is because of ignorance. It's this unknowing of true reality, this lack of wisdom that we keep experiencing in the unenlightened state, all the anger, frustration, agitation, annoyance, because we walk around firmly believing that it's other people that are causing us to be angry or frustrated. So what the Buddha is helping you to be able to see in a detailed format here as you go through each one of these is why you experience discontentedness. Sure, in the Four Noble Truths, he penetrates into it and helps you to understand that it's craving, desire, attachment, the mind longing, yearning. But this is the detail, that really what it comes back to is it comes back to ignorance. And why this is helpful for you is it helps you to understand what is your goal in the path to enlightenment, is to cultivate wisdom. And that's why you're not believing any of his teachings. You're learning, examining, investigating them intellectually. You're then reflecting on them to verify whether they're true or false. And then you're practicing his teachings. And as you practice them, you're making decisions through that wisdom that you're experiencing. But prior to having that wisdom, the mind is having this ignorance, right? So now with this ignorance, there's certain decisions that are being made that are unwise. And this leads to continued consciousness, that because the mind hasn't been purified of its ignorance, it continues to have craving, desire, attachment. So now that's the fuel that leads to the next consciousness. And now when this next consciousness is formed, it needs to find a name and form, which is the physical body. So it needs to find that physical body. So now the mind and the physical body come together, and the 6 sense spaces start to form and mature inside the womb. And now with those 6 sense spaces, there's contact through those, and then the individual is going to experience feelings, pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant. And the mind's going to experience craving, where it's longing, yearning. Then there's going to be this clinging, where the mind is holding on. Then there's going to be this existence where the being actually exists inside the womb. Then there's going to be birth, where the being comes out into the world. And when that being comes out into the world and is birthed, they're going to experience aging and death. That being is going to slowly age and ultimately die. And then it's also going to experience in the process this sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. This is how the whole mass of discontentedness comes about. So it all comes back to this first domino, so to speak. If you think about each one of these conditions on dependent origination like a domino, and if the first domino falls, it hits the next one and the next one and the next one and the next one. So if this ignorance is present, then it's going to hit the volitional formations, and that's going to create this chain event where ultimately you're going to end up in discontentedness. But when you get rid of the ignorance, when you have wisdom there, you've taken that domino out, right? And now it's just wisdom. So in this existence, you can dismantle this. And when we say dismantle it, it's to get rid of this ignorance. Because if you can get rid of this ignorance, you can get rid of the craving and clinging, and you'll get rid of the sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. This is how you'll know that this is true. Because the more wisdom that you cultivate, the more craving and clinging that you eliminate, the more sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair is eliminated out of the mind. It starts to reduce more and more and more. As your wisdom goes up and your craving and clinging comes down, your discontentedness comes down. And that's how you independently verify that this is true. Of course, you can go step by step and you can see this is true, but you can also do it through your practice. That if this is true, if you're arising wisdom, you should see your discontentedness diminishing. Right? And that's what the Buddha is helping you to see here on the next one. That now he's talking about the elimination and the dismantling of dependent origination. Because with the remainderless fading away and elimination of ignorance, then there's the elimination of these volitional formations that are based in that ignorance. Right? As an enlightened being, when you're wise, you're still going to make decisions, but you're just not making decisions based in ignorance anymore. They're based in this wisdom. And when you're an enlightened being and you've dismantled this, you still have a consciousness, but you're not going to experience the next consciousness. As an enlightened being, you still have a name and form. You still have a physical body, but you're not going to have another one, right? And you still have the 6 sense spaces as an enlightened being. And you still experience contact. And there are no longer any conditioned feelings by the time you get to enlightenment. You're only experiencing unconditioned mental qualities in the mind. Then there's no longer any craving. There's no longer any clinging. And you're still in this existence, but there's not going to be any future births. And you're still going to experience aging, where this body is going to continue to deteriorate over time. But when you get to the end of this life, we don't call it death. We call it final enlightenment, because that's where the body and the mind separate and that final attachment is eliminated. And by the time you get to enlightenment, you're no longer experiencing sorrow, grief, pain, displeasure, and despair. There is no longer any discontentedness. It's been completely eliminated, right? So you are dismantling this as part of your practice as you're growing and developing on the path. So I just thought I would kind of recap this a little bit since we studied it back in chapter 14. If you guys have questions on this now that you've maybe had some time to think about it and look at it and study it, let me know. You can put those into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like. Okay, it looks like Kristen has a question. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. It's about the volitional formations again, and as we start to, I guess, clear up our karma, right? The karma, unwholesome karma that we've accumulated in this lifetime, is that when the volitional formations will start to cease? Like the choices and decisions will then become wholesome because we're clearing up some of that unwholesome karma from the past? Is that kind of, am I getting that right?
Yeah, pretty much. By arising wisdom, you're making more and more wise decisions, right? Like now you're choosing to meditate. You're choosing to restrain your mind. You're choosing not to argue anymore. You're choosing not to put expectations on people. You are making wise decisions, even though you're not yet enlightened. You're in the process of making wise decisions. So the ignorance is coming down and the wisdom is going up. And while you're still making, in the unenlightened state, some unwise decisions, you're making more and more and more wise decisions with all these things that you're learning. And as a result of that, that's what's cleaning up your karma, is that you're now making wise decisions. So you're making wiser and wiser and wiser and wiser decisions.
Okay, thank you, teacher.
Okay, I don't see any other questions anywhere. So let's move to the next one, which is chapter 32. Is there someone who would like to read this? Okay, Samantha, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you. The little bit of soil in the fingernail. Monks, what do you think, which is more? The little bit of soil that I have taken up in my fingernail, or this great earth? Venerable sir, the great earth is more. The little bit of soil that the perfectly enlightened one has taken up in his fingernail is insignificant. Compared to the great earth, that little bit of soil is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction. So too, monks, for a noble disciple, a person accomplished in view who has made the breakthrough, the discontentedness that has been destroyed and eliminated is more, while that which remains is insignificant. Compared to the former mass of discontentedness that has been destroyed and eliminated, the latter is not calculable, does not bear comparison, does not amount even to a fraction, as there is a maximum of 7 more lives. He is one who understands as it really is. This is discontentedness. This is the cause of discontentedness. This is the elimination of discontentedness. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. Therefore, monks, an effort should be made to understand. This is discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the cause of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the elimination of discontentedness. An effort should be made to understand. This is the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So whenever you see the Buddha talking about a noble disciple, I think you understand now that that's someone who's studying his teachings very closely, right? Because he used this word noble because during his lifetime, if you were born into a rich, affluent family, you were considered to be a noble, and you were considered to be smart, intelligent, headed for a wonderful life, right? And if you were born into a family that lacked resources, you were not noble, right? So when people came to study with him, the Buddha was teaching that it's not about what family you're born into that determines whether you're noble or not. It's about how you cultivate wisdom in your actions and how you interact with people. So he would refer to anybody who was studying his teachings closely and who was developing wisdom as a noble disciple, someone who was studying his teachings very closely and had cultivated a significant amount of wisdom. So it didn't matter which family you were born into, you were automatically considered to be noble to him because you were actually cultivating wisdom, and it wasn't your birth of which determined whether you're noble. It's your actions and how you chose to function through the wisdom that you had cultivated. And then when he talks about a person who's accomplished in view, this is usually where he's talking about a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment. But where you know that he's really talking about someone in the first stage of enlightenment is right here where he says, as there is a maximum of 7 more lives. So you know right away he's talking about someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment. And what he's talking about here is he's saying someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment, that the discontentedness that they've destroyed or eliminated is much more than that which remains. So one of the things that I teach you guys is as you're moving through the 4 stages of enlightenment, your discontentedness is diminishing. And you can see that here in the words of the Buddha, that by the time you get to that first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness is a mere fraction of what it once was. There's still plenty of work for you to do on the path to enlightenment, being in that first stage of enlightenment, but you've seen a significant amount of improvement there. And you can see that here in the words of the Buddha, him sharing that as well. And the reason why is because this individual has made a breakthrough to understanding the 4 noble truths. This is discontentedness, the cause, the elimination, and the way leading to the elimination of discontentedness. That's the thing that's going to really help you and be the catalyst to helping you get to the point where you're dismantling and destroying discontentedness in the mind and eliminating it. Because until you penetrate into the Four Noble Truths, we still believe that it's other people that are causing these discontent feelings. But more and more, we can see the truth for ourselves, that it's our own mind. And now, when instead of pushing people away, being bitter, harsh, and hostile to them, or putting your expectations on people, you start to work on the real source of the problem, which is within one's own mind. And that's where you start applying the Eightfold Path. So that's why the Buddha says, hey, there should be this effort made to be able to get to the point where you've penetrated into the Four Noble Truths, because if you can make your way to the first stage of enlightenment, your discontentedness is going to be a mere fraction of what it once was. It's going to be minimal. So here he's talking to people who aren't in the first stage of enlightenment. He's saying, hey, you guys should make an effort to learn these Four Noble Truths, because by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, you're going to experience a lot less discontentedness, right? So let me know what questions you guys have here on this particular chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So we'll go to chapter 33. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Samantha again. Go ahead, ma'am.
The achievement of other communities cannot compare with the achievement of a noble disciple. Monks, suppose that a man would place on Sinnaru, the king of mountains, 7 grains of gravel the size of mung beans. What do you think, monks? Which is more, the 7 grains of gravel the size of mung beans that have been placed there, or Sinnaru, the king of mountains? Venerable sir, Sinnaru, the king of mountains, is more. The 7 grains of gravel the size of mung beans are insignificant. They do not amount to 100th part or 1,000th part or 100,000th part of Sinnaru, the king of mountains. So too, monks, the achievements of ascetics, Brahmins, and wanderers of other communities do not amount to 100th part or 1,000th part or 100,000th part of the achievement of a noble disciple, a person accomplished in view who has made the breakthrough. So great an achievement, monks, is a person accomplished in view, so great in direct knowledge and experience.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. So again, the Buddha is talking about a noble disciple here, someone who studied closely. He's saying that them compared to someone from another community, that this noble disciple has made much more progress than this other person. Now, when we think about the lifetime of a Buddha and when a Buddha is in existence, we might think that he's the only person teaching. He's like the only game in town, but that's not true, because a Buddha doesn't go around and perform countless miracles to try to convince people who he is. Instead, he's just going to start teaching. And then if he was wise enough to be able to get to enlightenment by himself, he would be wise enough to be able to start sharing his teachings without people knowing that he's a Buddha. And now people can independently verify his teachings, train the mind, and actually experience more and more of the qualities of enlightenment and getting to enlightenment. So there were other people that were teaching and claiming that it was their teachings that lead to enlightenment. And the Buddha knew that it wasn't those teachings that lead to enlightenment, that it was his teachings that led to enlightenment. So what he's saying here is someone who studied with me and is a noble disciple who's experienced this breakthrough, they've experienced much more progress than this other person who isn't studying to learn the true teachings. Because here, when he's talking about this breakthrough, who has made the breakthrough, that's someone who's understood the Four Noble Truths. That's what he calls the breakthrough. Someone accomplished in view is someone who meets all those criteria, those discourses that we studied last week. So there could be other people that are studying and learning with these other teachers, but they weren't learning what the Buddha was teaching. Remember, they were hanging themselves upside down from trees. They were laying on beds of nails. They were starving themselves. They were piercing their body with metal implements. They thought that if they caused pain to the physical body and their mind could overcome that they would get to enlightenment. But then here's his community that's training the mind, learning about the Four Noble Truths, the Eightfold Path, meditation, the 4 healthy mental states of the Brahma Viharas, really actively working with the mind skillfully to be able to eliminate unwholesome qualities and cultivate wholesome qualities. So this type of individual is going to be much more accomplished to be able to now train their mind further and experience more and more progress. So that's what he's saying, and using this analogy of this big mountain compared to these 7 grains of mung bean, right? That they would basically, be paled in comparison. The size of this mountain is much larger than these little grains of gravel the size of mung beans, right? And it's the same thing, that the accomplishments of someone who's truly studying the true teachings is going to be way more significant than somebody who's not doing those same things. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So we'll go to the next one. This is chapter 34, and it looks like Pat would like to read this one. Go ahead, sir.
A noble one with developed sense bases. And how, Ananda, is one a noble one with developed sense bases? Here, Ananda, when a monk sees a form with the eye, hears a sound with the ear, smells an odor with the nose, tastes a flavor with the tongue, touches a physical object with the body, recognizes a mental object with the mind, there arises in him what is agreeable. There arises what is disagreeable. There arises what is both agreeable and disagreeable. If he should aspire, may I reside perceiving the unrepulsive in the repulsive. He resides perceiving the unrepulsive in the repulsive. If he should aspire, may I reside perceiving the repulsive in the unrepulsive. He resides perceiving the repulsive in the unrepulsive. If he should aspire, may I reside perceiving the unrepulsive in the repulsive and the unrepulsive. He resides perceiving the unrepulsive in that. If he should aspire, may I reside perceiving the repulsive in the unrepulsive and the repulsive. He resides perceiving the repulsive in that. If he should aspire, may I, avoiding both the repulsive and unrepulsive, reside in equanimity, mindful and fully aware. He resides in equanimity toward that, mindful and fully aware. Ananda, that is how one is a noble one with developed sense bases. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So I think that you guys have all studied this 6 sense bases to a certain degree. We have a book coming up, volume 9, where we're going to go into that in more detail. But essentially what you've maybe come to understand is that the mind has those 10 fetters, and one of the fetters is sensual desire, where the mind is longing, yearning through the sense bases of the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind itself. It's craving and longing, yearning for agreeable contact. And when you have agreeable contact through your sense bases, there's these pleasant feelings that are experienced. They're conditioned based on that contact that the mind sees as agreeable. Based on its sensual desire, it sees this thing as agreeable. But then the problem with that is that when you experience contact that the mind considers to be disagreeable, you're going to get painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So the mind's central desire is seeing contact as agreeable and disagreeable, and it's flipping back and forth between this, and it can only be happy when it has agreeable contact. So what you ultimately would like to get to is what the Buddha is talking about down here in the last sentence. But what he's talking about here in these others is he's saying, hey, if you would like to perceive the unrepulsive in the repulsive, meaning if you would like to perceive the agreeable in the disagreeable, then you'll see that. That's what you're going to see. But if you would like to see the disagreeable in the agreeable, or the repulsive in the unrepulsive, then that's what you'll see, right? And he goes through these different statements. But he says, if you have the thought and you aspire that may I avoid both the repulsive and unrepulsive, meaning the disagreeable and the agreeable, meaning you don't have that in your mind any longer, that you don't see contact as either agreeable or disagreeable, or repulsive or unrepulsive, and you just reside in equanimity, where your mind is calm and composed, where you have mindfulness, where there's awareness of mind and you're fully aware of the mind, then that's what you'll reside in. And that's how you develop your sense bases, is that you get to a point where no matter what you experience through the sense bases, that you can reside with equanimity. Because if you're walking down the street and you smell flowers and you get so excited and happy about that, when you take a few more steps and you smell the sewer, you'll be repulsed by that and be like, oh, that's horrible. And you'll be disgusted, right? But in that situation, your mind doesn't have equanimity where you're calm and composed. Instead, you can walk past the flower shop and be like, wow, that smells really wonderful. That's an amazing smell. But your mind can understand this is not permanent. This is an impermanent situation. Don't cling to it. Because now you walk a few more steps and you smell the sewer, and it's like, wow, that's pretty ripe. Let me just keep walking. Right? No need to be upset, no need to be frustrated. You can reside with equanimity. And the way you do that is having mindfulness or awareness of your mind, that anytime you see your mind pulling towards the agreeable and craving and trying to cling to that, you restrain your mind and pull it back. And anytime you see your mind pushing away the disagreeable or the repulsive, you restrain the mind and you pull it back and don't allow it to do that. And now more and more, your mind won't see things as repulsive or unrepulsive or agreeable or disagreeable. It'll just reside with this full awareness and equanimity where you can be calm and composed no matter what you experience. So you'll just have cheerfulness, gladness, and brightness in your mind at all times. Because with this favoring and opposing, or this agreeable or disagreeable, this unrepulsive and repulsive in the mind, you can only be happy when you get what you want, when you're getting agreeable contact. But when you experience disagreeable contact, you'll be angry or frustrated. So by getting rid of that, you can just be cheerful and pleased and uplifted at all times. So the Buddha is explaining this is what it is that you would really like to be focused on. If you focus on these other ones, then yeah, that's the way you're going to think. That if you perceive the unrepulsive and the repulsive, then yeah, that's what you're going to perceive. Or if you perceive the repulsive and the unrepulsive, then yep, that's what you're going to perceive. But that's not what you're interested in continuing to experience. You would like to get to the point where that agreeable and disagreeable contact in the mind doesn't even exist. You just understand this is all impermanent, and sometimes you're going to experience this type of thing, and sometimes you're going to experience that type of thing, and that's just normal. And you can remain, with equanimity and calmness regardless. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. This is chapter 34. Okay, I don't see any questions. So we'll go to chapter 35. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, it looks like Kristen. Go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. Difference in understanding of teachings between a stream enterer and an arahant. First discourse. Monks, there are these 5 aggregates subject to clinging. What 5? 1. The form aggregate subject to clinging. 2. The feeling aggregate subject to clinging. 3. The perception aggregate subject to clinging. 4. The volitional formations, choices, decisions aggregate subject to clinging. 5. The consciousness aggregate subject to clinging. When monks, a noble disciple understands, as they really are, the cause and the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these 5 aggregates subject to clinging. Monks, then he is called a noble disciple, who is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the nether world, fixed in destination, with enlightenment as his destination. When monks, having understood as they really are the cause and the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these 5 aggregates subject to clinging, a monk is liberated by non-clinging. Then he is called a monk who is an arahant, one whose taints are destroyed, who has lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached his goal, completely destroyed the fetters of existence, one completely liberated through final knowledge, wisdom.
All right. Thank you, ma'am. Yeah. So here the Buddha is making a distinction between a stream enterer, someone in the first stage of enlightenment, and someone who's an arahant, someone who's actually enlightened. And this is the first discourse because he's going to talk about some other things too here that's different between these two people, right? So remember, never look at the Buddha's teachings in isolation. You need to look at them in the totality because he'll share this discourse, but then he's going to share something else and something else and something else. So it's not just one discourse that paints the whole picture. So first, understanding the 5 aggregates, that these are the 5 things that make a living being a living being. All living beings have these things. They have form, which is the physical form, feelings, there's perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world. Then there's volitional formations, which are choices and decisions. And then there's the consciousness, or the mind itself, right? So the mind can cling to all of these things. And it's important for you to know this because it's pretty clear when your mind is clinging to something of physical form, like a mobile phone or a computer or a relationship or something like that. These are very tangible things that you can see. But these other things, you don't necessarily see these, and that's why it's important to know the 5 aggregates. One is that you need to know what a living being is so that you don't cause harm to any living beings, because anytime you cause harm will come back to you. But the other reason why you need to know the 5 aggregates is because your mind will cling to these things and experience discontentedness because of them. And they're not so obvious because you might not be obvious you're clinging to those pleasant feelings or the painful feelings. You might not realize you're clinging to your perceptions, your views and opinions, because it's not anything tangible right in front of you, or your choices and decisions, or the consciousness itself. So this is why the 5 aggregates are an important teaching for you, so that you ensure that you're not causing harm to any living being. Remember, you can cause harm through causing harm to a being's physical body, to their material possessions, or their reputation. So you're not interested in doing that. So this is why the 5 aggregates is helpful for you in that regard. But then also you need to get to the point where you're not clinging to any of the 5 aggregates. So what he's saying here is a noble disciple, if someone who's in the first stage of enlightenment, who's a stream enter, they understand the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape in regards to the 5 aggregates, that they understand this, right? And now because they understand it, they are fixed in destination. They have enlightenment as their destination. They, because of being in the first stage of enlightenment, will get to enlightenment, either in this life or a future life, a maximum of 7. But the difference for an enlightened being is not only have they understood the cause, the disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape in regards to the 5 aggregates, but their mind is liberated, that they're no longer clinging to those 5 aggregates. In the first stage of enlightenment, they'll still be clinging to those 5 aggregates, right? So the enlightened being has destroyed the clinging, that they've eliminated the taints, the individual fetters. So that's why the Buddha is saying that this is a real difference between the two. So if you don't yet understand the cause, the disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape, this is something that you're going to need to understand. And we've talked about this in a previous class, but I'll just kind of review it here. And then if you have questions, let me know. The cause of all that you're experiencing is this craving, desire, attachment. That's what's causing these discontent feelings. The disappearance is that there's this universal truth of impermanence where things are constantly changing, the arising, changing, and fading away. But the mind is craving permanence. That's the cause. That it's craving, desire, attach, it's craving permanence, but yet there's this disappearance, which is the universal truth of impermanence. Things are constantly changing, but yet the mind's craving permanence. The gratification is that the mind has this central desire where it's chasing after pleasant feelings. It's wanting that agreeable contact so that it can get those pleasant feelings. The danger in allowing your mind to do that is that you're going to experience discontentedness, conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. If you allow your mind to chase, you're either going to get what you want and you're going to get conditioned pleasant feelings, and then when that thing changes, you'll end up in the painful feelings. Or as you're chasing that gratification, you're not going to get what you want, and then you're going to experience the painful feelings, the anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So that's the real danger in allowing the mind to continue to chase after this gratification. Then there's the escape, which is the Eightfold Path. The Eightfold Path is the perfect plan that's going to help you to eliminate all of this, where you can eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. You can eliminate the initial cause of all of this. So you need to understand the cause, disappearance, gratification, and danger, that these 5 aggregates, clinging to them is just going to produce discontentedness, and they will disappear. They are impermanent. All of this that you're experiencing is impermanent. And if you keep allowing your mind to get gratification based on clinging to any of these 5 aggregates, then the danger of that is you're going to experience discontentedness. And the way to escape that is the Eightfold Path. So this is how a person in the first stage of enlightenment will have an understanding of the cause, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape. But the person who's actually enlightened, not only have they understood that, but they've actually trained their mind well enough with the Eightfold Path that they no longer are clinging to any of those five aggregates, that they still exist, but they're no longer clinging to it. So they're not clinging to the physical form. They're no longer experiencing conditioned feelings. They're no longer clinging to any perceptions. They're no longer clinging to volitional formations, and they're no longer clinging to the consciousness. Their mind's fully liberated, and now they're completely peaceful and joyful. So let me know what questions you have here where the Buddha is making this distinction between a stream enter and an arahant, an enlightened being, because an enlightened being has eliminated the clinging to these five aggregates, where a person in the first stage of enlightenment will just understand what they are and the cause, the disappearance, the gratification, the danger, and the escape. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to the next chapter. This is chapter 36. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Samantha. Go ahead, ma'am.
Difference in understanding of teachings between a stream enterer and an arahant. Second discourse. Monks, there are these 6 sense bases. What 6? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. One, monks, a noble disciple understands as they really are the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these 6 sense bases. Then he is called a noble disciple who is a stream enterer, no longer bound to the netherworld, fixed in destiny, with enlightenment as his destination. Monks, there are these 6 sense bases. What 6? The eye, the ear, the nose, the tongue, the body, the mind. When monks, having understood as they really are, the gratification, the danger, and the escape in the case of these 6 sense bases, a monk is liberated by non-clinging. Then he is called a monk who is an arahant, one whose taints are destroyed, who has lived the holy life, done what had to be done, laid down the burden, reached his own goal, completely destroyed the fetters of existence, one completely liberated through final knowledge and wisdom.
All right, thank you, ma'am. So here, this is a second discourse where now we understand that a person in the first stage of enlightenment will understand the 6 sense bases. They will understand what these are. That's what the Buddha is saying here, that they'll understand the gratification, the danger, and the escape. The gratification is that the mind, with its central desire, is longing, yearning through these sense bases, wanting permanently agreeable contact. The danger in that is if you get what you want, you're going to get conditioned pleasant feelings, but then when that condition changes, because it will change, you're going to end up in the painful feelings. And the danger is also if you're chasing after that gratification and you don't get what you want, you're going to get the painful feelings. And the escape of that is the 6 sense bases. So a person who's in the first stage of enlightenment will understand that. Not just that, there's a whole lot of other things, right? Remember I mentioned how getting into that first stage of enlightenment, you're at base camp in Mount Everest. You've collected up everything you need. And this is one of the things that you've collected up, is that you understand the gratification, danger, and the escape in regards to the 6 sense bases, right? And now you need to make your way to the summit. And that's where an enlightened being, not only have they understood the gratification, danger, and escape in regards to the 6 sense bases, but they're not clinging to anything that comes through as contact through the 6 sense bases. They're still experiencing contact because they're in this life, but they're not clinging to any of it. Their mind doesn't see that contact as agreeable or disagreeable. It's just contact. That's all it is. That person isn't really disrespecting me. They're just saying things that are disrespectful, but it's not me, right? Your ear is just hearing that particular sound. It's almost like if you remember back to Charlie Brown, when they used to get on the phone, it was like, wonk, 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 wonk. That's basically all you hear by the time you get to enlightenment and people are saying things that are unwise. It's just wonk, 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 wonk. Okay, if they would like to say that, big deal, right? It's not agreeable or disagreeable to you. You're not having feelings about it. It's just that's what people are saying. Wonk, 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 wonk. It's just a sound in your ear. That's all it is, right? So you're not clinging to that and forming feelings any longer. That's the difference between someone in the first stage of enlightenment and someone who's enlightened is that the enlightened being is no longer clinging to this contact, and they have already eliminated any of the clinging and any of the taints or the fetters. Where the person in the first stage of enlightenment, they just understand the six sense bases. They haven't actually eliminated the clinging through them yet. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Okay, I don't see any questions. So now we'll go to the next one. This is chapter 37. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, Mr. Pat. Go ahead, sir.
One who cultivates fully reaches fulfillment. One who cultivates in parts succeeds in part. Monks, every half month, more than 150 training guidelines come up for recitation. Clansmen who aspire for their own good train in these. These are all comprised with these three trainings. What three? The training in the higher virtuous behavior, moral conduct, the training in the higher mind, mental discipline, and the training in the higher wisdom. These are the three trainings in which all this is comprised. Here, monks, a monk fulfills virtuous behavior, concentration, and wisdom. He falls into wrongdoing in regard to the lesser and minor training guidelines and rehabilitates himself. For what reason? Because I have not said that he is incapable of this, but in regard to those training guidelines that are fundamental to the spiritual life, in practice of the spiritual life, his behavior is constant and steadfast. Having undertaken the training guidance, he trains in them. With the destruction of the taints, he realizes for himself with direct knowledge, experience in this very life, the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and having entered upon it, he resides in it. If he does not attain to penetrate this with the complete destruction of the five lower fetters, he is an attainer of nibbana, between one life and the next. If he does not attain and penetrate this with the complete destruction of the five lower fetters, he is an attainer of nibbana upon landing. If he does not attain and penetrate this with the complete destruction of the five lower fetters, he is an attainer of nibbana without extra effort. If he does not attain and penetrate this with the complete destruction of the five lower fetters, he is an attainer of nibbana and with extra effort. If he does not attain and penetrate this with the complete destruction of the five lower fetters, he is one bound upstream, heading toward the heavenly realm. If he does not attain and penetrate this with the complete destruction of the three fetters, with the diminishing of craving, anger, and ignorance, unknowing of true reality, he is a once returner who, after coming back to this world only one more time, makes an end of discontentedness. If he does not attain and penetrate this with the complete destruction of the three fetters, he is a one seed attainer who, after being reborn once more in human existence, makes an end of discontentedness. If he does not attain and penetrate this with the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a family-to-family attainer who, after roaming and wandering on among wholesome families 2 or 3 times, makes an end of discontentedness. If he does not attain and penetrate this with the complete destruction of three fetters, he is a 7 times at most attainer who, after roaming and wandering on among heavenly beings and humans 7 times at most, makes an end of discontentedness. Thus, monks, one who cultivates fully reaches fulfillment. One who cultivates in part succeeds in part. This training guidance, I say, is not unfruitful. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Pat. So here, the Buddha is starting off with saying, once every half month, meaning about every 2 weeks, there's these 150 training guidelines that comes up for recitation, right? This is where you can see that they use chanting as a way to commit the teachings to memory, and that there's only 150 training guidelines. Nowadays, if you talk to most ordained practitioners, they will tell you that they're practicing 227 precepts or guidelines. This is a modification from what the Buddha taught. The Buddha only taught 150, but people have modified his teachings, so you'll see people that are practicing things that he never necessarily taught. But the things that he was having people study were based on the Eightfold Path. Whenever you see him talking about this higher virtuous behavior, this moral conduct, that's the moral conduct from the Eightfold Path. The training in the higher mind, that mental discipline, that's the mental discipline section of the Eightfold Path, right effort, right mindfulness, and right concentration. And then the higher wisdom is the wisdom section of the Eightfold Path. That's the 3 trainings that he would focus people on actually reciting. He would have them committed to their memory. So that's why when I teach, I guide you guys to commit the Eightfold Path to your memory. During the lifetime of the Buddha, it was reciting the words that allowed them to be able to do that. Nowadays, we have study guides, we have books, we have videos, podcasts. You're not going to be able to practice the Eightfold Path if you don't commit it to your memory. So you're going to need to commit it to your memory. Not necessarily word for word, but you're going to need to know what each one of those factors are and how to actually practice it. Because as you fulfill this virtuous behavior, that's where the concentration and focus and clarity comes in, and the mind's wisdom is increasing more and more. And now if you fall into any quote-unquote wrongdoing, meaning a misstep, in regards to some of the lesser or minor training guidelines, you'll be able to actually fix that because you'll understand what it is that you tripped up on, right? So that's what the Buddha's guiding you to do here, is to really pay attention to that Eightfold Path and really commit it to your memory. And now as you develop this, you can actually slowly develop the mind to get to the point where it's actually experiencing enlightenment. But if you just do this little by little, spanned over 30, 40 years, that's what the Buddha is saying, is if you cultivate in parts, you're going to have fulfillment in parts. But if you cultivate the mind fully, then you'll experience this full attainment of enlightenment. And he's going through all the different types of attainments that you could have in regards to the 4 stages of enlightenment. He's going into some of the more detailed versions of this, but we, mainly talk about the 4 stages now, where the Buddha has, a much deeper way of delineating this. And some of the things that I'll share with you here that you aren't going to necessarily know in this life, but just know that this is possible. That the Buddha, first of all, is talking about here that someone who completely purifies the mind, destroying the taints, then this person's mind is liberated. They're actually enlightened. They fully cultivated the mind, so they're fully experiencing the realization of enlightenment. Right? But now as you have less and less attainments, when you're not really cultivating the mind so much, now it's kind of going down and down and down and down. So here what he says, that somebody can attain enlightenment between one life and the next. That's essentially equivalent to getting to enlightenment at death. Right? That if you get to enlightenment during this life, that's what he's talking about right here. But what he's talking about here is that if you die and then you attain enlightenment before there's actually rebirth, that is possible. So you can actually get to enlightenment prior to being reborn, which that would be the next best option, right? It's still not ideal because you've gone through your life being agitated or frustrated to a certain degree, but at least you're not going to experience rebirth, right? So that's an option. Another option here is that you can actually get to a point where you attain enlightenment upon landing, meaning as soon as the consciousness comes into that next existence, that you can actually get to enlightenment in that moment, right? So now there's not enlightenment in your previous life, there's not enlightenment at death, but now once the consciousness lands into a name and form, then an individual can get to enlightenment there at that moment. But oftentimes when that's occurring, then there's actually potentially a miscarriage or the baby's not born or something like that. That can actually happen at that point where maybe this being had gotten rid of all of his cravings, except there was one craving left, which it was still clinging to existence and wanted to exist in a human form. And now, boom, it lands into a human form, it extinguishes that craving, and now maybe it even ends up, perishing in the womb of the woman. So this is where every time someone has a miscarriage, it doesn't necessarily mean that something quote unquote bad has happened. It might have been that this being actually attained enlightenment upon landing, right? Then we have other options here where a being could actually get to this next life and now they will attain to enlightenment without this extra effort, that it wasn't really much of a struggle for them, that they've eliminated the 5 lower fetters, and now in this next life they're going to get to enlightenment without much extra effort. And then the next one is that there's actually extra effort, meaning there's struggle there. The next one is that they're actually being reborn in the heavenly world. That's a non-returner. And then these others you've studied before, a once returner, and then the various types of stream enterers. So let me know what questions you guys have here, where the Buddha is just saying like, hey, you can cultivate this path fully and you can reach fulfillment fully, or you can do it in little bits and pieces and parts. But obviously the idea would be to fully reach fulfillment, where you get to enlightenment in this life. So let me know what questions you guys have here. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. So now we'll go to the next chapter. This is chapter 38. If you guys would like to volunteer to read this one, just let me know. Okay, Kristen, go ahead, ma'am.
Thank you, teacher. 7 kinds of persons found existing in the world similar to those in water. Monks, there are these 7 kinds of persons found existing in the world similar to those in water. What 7? 1. Here, some person has gone under once and remains under. 2. Some person has risen up and then goes under. 3. Some person has risen up and stays there. 4. Some person has risen up, sees clearly, and looks around. 5. Some person has risen up and is crossing over. 6. Some person has risen up and gained a firm foothold. 7. Some person has risen up, crossed over, and gone beyond. A Brahmin who stands on high ground. 1. And how, monks, is a person one who has gone under once and remains under? Here, some person possesses exclusively black, unwholesome qualities. In this way, a person is one who has gone under once and remains under. 2. And how is a person one who has risen up and then goes under? Here, some person has risen up, thinking. Good is confidence in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is a sense of moral wrongdoing in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is moral concern in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is energy in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is wisdom in cultivating wholesome qualities. However, his confidence does not become stable or grow, but rather diminishes. His sense of moral wrongdoing, moral concern, energy, wholesome qualities, and wisdom does not become stable or grow, but rather diminishes. In this way, a person goes under, is one who has risen up and then goes under. 3. And how is a person one who has risen up and stays put? Here, some person has risen up. Good in confidence in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is a sense of moral wrongdoing in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is moral concern in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is energy in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is wisdom in cultivating wholesome qualities. His confidence neither diminishes nor grows, it just stays put. His sense of moral wrongdoing, his moral concern, his energy, and his wisdom neither diminishes nor grows, it just stays put. In this way, a person is one who has risen up and stays put. 4. And how is a person who has risen up, sees clearly, and looks around? Here, some person has risen up. Good in confidence in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is a sense of moral wrongdoing in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is moral concern in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is energy in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is wisdom in cultivating wholesome qualities. With the complete destruction of the 3 fetters, this person is a stream enterer, no longer subject to rebirth, in the lower world, fixed in destination, heading for enlightenment. It is in this way that a person is one who has risen up, sees clearly, and looks around. 5. And how is a person one who has risen up and is crossing over? Here, some person has risen up, good in confidence in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is a sense of moral wrongdoing and cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is moral concern in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is energy in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is wisdom in cultivating wholesome qualities. With the complete destruction of the three fetters, and with the diminishing of craving, anger, and ignorance, a knowing of true reality, this person is a once returner, who, after coming back to this world only one more time, will make an end to discontentedness. It is in this way that a person is one who has risen up and is crossing over. 6. And how is a person one who has risen up and gained a firm foothold? Here, some person has risen up. Good in confidence in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is a sense of moral wrongdoing in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is a moral concern in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is energy in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is wisdom in cultivating wholesome qualities. With the complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, he is of spontaneous birth in the heavenly realm, due to attain final nibbana, final enlightenment, there without returning from that world. It is in this way that a person is one who has risen up and gained a firm foothold. 7. And how is a person one who has risen up, crossed over, and gone beyond, a Brahmin who stands on high ground? Here, some person has risen up, good in confidence in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is a sense of moral wrongdoing in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is moral concern in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is energy in cultivating wholesome qualities. Good is wisdom in cultivating wholesome qualities. With the destruction of the taints, he has realized for himself with direct knowledge, experience, in this very life, the taintless liberation of mind, liberation by wisdom, and having entered upon it, he resides in it. It is in this way that a person is one who has risen up, crossed over, and gone beyond, a Brahmin who stands on high ground. These monks are the 7 kinds of persons found existing in the world, similar to those in water. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Kristen. So the Buddha uses these analogies to be able to help you to remember his teachings, because if you can remember a story, it's much easier for you to remember what he's teaching. So he's talking about these 7 types of development that someone would experience on the path to enlightenment. And if you spend any amount of time interacting with people, you will see these types of individuals. I've seen all these types of individuals, right? This first one, what he's talking about is someone who's just really unwholesome. They have unwholesome qualities, and they're really not interested in doing any kind of work to improve the condition of their mind. He's talking about this person as someone who's gone under and remains underneath the water, right? They're basically drowning, right? This second person, he's talking about one who has risen up and then goes under. That this person, thinks, oh, good is confidence in developing these wholesome qualities and doing all these other wholesome things. Like, wow, that's really, really good. However, their confidence doesn't become stable and grow, but rather it diminishes, right? So this person is basically risen up and like, wow, this is really great. But then they go under the water, right? And now this third one is a person who has risen up and stays put. That they rise up and like, wow, it's so great to be able to cultivate all these wholesome qualities. People get really enamored with the teachings of the Buddha. Oh my gosh, I can't imagine that all these teachings are actually there. But their confidence never grows, right? It doesn't diminish, but it doesn't grow. It just stays put. And because of that, they don't actually make their way further on the path. It's just like, wow, this is all great. This path is really great. They just see the greatness in it, but they don't actually develop their confidence to really put forth effort to be dedicated, determined, and diligent to grow on the path. Then a person who has risen up, sees clearly, and looks around. This is an individual who has the confidence in developing these wholesome qualities, and then they eliminate the 3 fetters. This is the person who is a stream enter, right? They've gotten to that first stage of enlightenment, right? And now he's talking about a person who's risen up and is crossing over. This is someone who's like, wow, these teachings are really great. There's all this wholesome qualities, and they actually eliminate the 3 fetters, but then they also diminish number 4 and 5. Here he's talking about it as craving, anger, and ignorance, and it's just diminished. This is a once returner, right? This is a person who's risen up and they're crossing over. They're about to get to enlightenment in their next life. Then the 6th one is a person who has risen up and gained a firm foothold. This is a person who rises up, is like, wow, look at all these great teachings, and then they actually eliminate the 5 lower fetters. This is someone who is a non-returner, and they're going to be reborn in the heavenly realm and attain enlightenment there. And then there's the 7th type of person who has risen up, crossed over, gone beyond, a Brahmin standing on high ground. And this is someone who rises up, is like, wow, look at all these great teachings. They develop their mind, they eliminate all the 10 fetters, and they actually experience enlightenment. So the Buddha is talking about this development and this type of person that you'll encounter as these 7 types of people who come to actually learn the teachings. And if you're around the teachings enough, you'll actually see this. So let me know what questions you guys have here. This is chapter 38, the 7 kinds of persons found existing in the world, similar to those in water. So it looks like Samantha has put a question in here. She says, chapter 38, one of my favorite teachings, terrific examples and analogies. Okay, yeah. All right, let me see if we have any questions or anything anywhere else. I don't see anything. So, all right, let's go to the next one, which is chapter 39. Is there someone who would like to read this one? Okay, looks like Vibhav. Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, teacher. 9 persons passing away with the residue remaining are freed from hell. On one occasion, the perfectly enlightened one was dwelling at Savatthi, at Jada's grove, at the Pendika's park. Then, in the morning, the Venerable Sariputta dressed, took his bowl and robe, and entered for alms food. It then occurred to him, it is still too early to walk for alms food in Savatthi. Let me go to the park of the wanderers of other communities. Then the Venerable Sariputta went to the park of the wanderers of other communities. He exchanged greetings with those wanderers and, when they had concluded their greetings and cordial talk, sat down to one side. Now on that occasion those wanderers had assembled and were sitting together when this conversation arose among them. Friends, anyone who passes away with the residue remaining is not freed from hell, the animal realm, or the realm of afflicted spirits. He is not freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. When the Venerable Sariputta neither excited and nor rejected the statement of these wanderers, but rose from his seat and left, thinking, I shall find out what the perfectly enlightened one has to say about the statement. Then, when the Venerable Sariputta had walked from alms food in Savatthi, after his meal, on returning from his alms round, he approached the perfectly enlightened one, paid homage, respect to him, and sat down to one side. He here reports verbatim the entire course of events and ends. I rose from my seat and left, thinking, I shall find out from what the perfectly enlightened one has to say about this statement. Who, Sariputta, are those unwise and unskillful wanderers of other communities, and who are those that know one with the residue remaining as one with the residue remaining, and one without residue remaining as one without residue remaining? These 9 persons, Sariputta, passing away with the residue remaining, are freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. What 9? 1. Here, Sariputta, some person fulfills virtuous behavior, moral conduct, and concentration, mental discipline, but cultivates wisdom only to a moderate extent. The complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, this person is an attainer of Nibbana, enlightenment, between one life and the next. This is the first person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. 2. Again, some person fulfills virtuous behavior, moral conduct, and concentration, mental discipline, but cultivates wisdom only to a moderate extent. The complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, this person is an attainer of Nibbana upon landing. This is the second person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. 3. Again, some person fulfills virtuous behavior, moral conduct, and concentration, but cultivates wisdom only to a moderate extent. With the complete destruction of the five lower fetters, this person is an attainer of nibbana without extra effort. This is the third person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. 4. Again, some person fulfills virtuous behavior and concentration, but cultivates wisdom only to a moderate extent. With the complete destruction of the five lower fetters, this person is an attainer of nibbana with extra effort. This is the fourth person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. Again, some person fulfills virtuous behavior and concentration, but cultivates wisdom only to a moderate extent. With the complete destruction of the five lower fetters, this person is one bound upstream, heading towards the heavenly realm. This is the fifth person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. Again, some person fulfills virtuous behavior but cultivates concentration and wisdom only to a moderate extent. With the complete destruction of three fetters and with the diminishing of craving, anger, and ignorance, this person is a once returner who, after coming back to this world only one more time, makes an end of discontentedness. This is the sixth person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. Again, some person fulfills virtuous behavior but cultivates concentration and wisdom only to a moderate extent. With the complete destruction of the three fetters, this person is a one-seat attainer who, being reborn once more as a human being, makes an end of discontentedness. This is the seventh person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. Again, some person fulfills virtuous behavior but cultivates concentration and wisdom only to a moderate extent. With the complete destruction of the three fetters, this person is a family-to-family attainer who, after roaming and wandering among wholesome families 2 or 3 times, makes an end of discontentedness. This is the eighth person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. Again, some person fulfills virtuous behavior but cultivates concentration and wisdom only to a moderate extent. With the complete destruction of the three fetters, this person is the 7 times at most attainer, who after roaming and wandering among heavenly beings and humans 7 times at most, makes an end of discontentedness. This is the ninth person, passing away with the residue remaining, who is freed from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. Who, Sariputta, are those unwise and unskillful wanderers of other communities? And who are those that know one with the residue remaining as one with residue remaining, and one without residue remaining as one without residue remaining? These 9 persons, passing away with the residue remaining, are freed from the hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, freed from the plane of misery, the bad destination, the lower world. Sariputta, I had not been disposed to give this teaching exposition to the male and female ordained practitioners, male household practitioners, and female household practitioners. For what reason? I was concerned that on hearing this teaching exposition, they might take to the ways of complacency. However, I have spoken this teaching exposition for the purpose of answering the question. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Vibhav. So this student of the Buddha's, Sariputta, who was one of his very close students, was off kind of interacting with these students from other communities, because as I've shared, there were other people who were teaching at different times, and they were claiming that if somebody has residual remaining in their mind, remaining a residual amount of craving and clinging, a residual amount of pollutions in their mind, that they're not free from the lower realm. And when Sariputta heard this, he didn't get excited about this. He didn't either confirm or deny it. He just went and talked to the Buddha to ask the Buddha the question, like, hey, these other people are saying that if you still have a residual amount of craving or clinging in your mind, you could still be reborn into the lower realms, right? And the Buddha is like, hey, who are these unwise and unskillful wanderers of other communities who, first of all, that they know that one still has a residual remaining, or one is without residual remaining? Because how would that person even be able to determine that, right? Because a Buddha would be able to determine that kind of thing, but this average person who's a student from another community, they wouldn't be able to even determine whether someone has a residual amount of craving and clinging in their mind or not, right? So that's the first thing that the Buddha shares. And then he's saying, well, there are these 9 persons that actually have a residual amount of pollution in the mind, but they're actually free from hell, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits, which is in exact contrast to what these other people had shared with Sariputta. And then the Buddha goes through a detailed description of each individual type of person that has a residual amount of craving in the mind, a residual amount of pollutions in the mind, but yet they're free from the hell realm, the animal realm, and the realm of afflicted spirits. So he goes through these 9 different types of individuals, helping Sariputta to be able to see that, hey, these are people that have residual amounts of craving and clinging, and they're free from the lower realms. And then ultimately what the Buddha says is, hey, I wasn't planning to actually share this teaching with you guys, because he was concerned that it would actually produce complacency among the students. So he wasn't interested in them knowing this necessarily, that with this residual amount of craving and clinging, that they could be freed from this lower realms, and that instead what a Buddha is doing is he's focusing their mind on getting to enlightenment, and he wasn't interested in them getting complacency. So let me know what questions you guys have here on this chapter. Looks like Vibhav has a question. Go ahead, sir.
Yeah, thank you. So in the previous chapter also, the Buddha described that the person might attain enlightenment between this birth and the next. And in this one also, I think they've said something similar. And in this chapter, it said that they still have because they still have a residue remaining. They will. Actually, can you actually please go back up to the main? All the way to the first one, I think. Yeah. So here this describes a person who fulfills the virtuous behavior, concentration, and mental discipline. But with the complete destruction of the 5 lower fetters, the person is an attainer of nibbana between one life and next. But this is because they all have a residue remaining. But because they're passing away with the residue remaining, they are freed from hell and animal realm, and then of afflicted spirits. But because they have a residue remaining, and between one life and the next, I would assume this means death, like you said in the last chapter. Does it mean that at this point they will not be attending nibbana, right? Because they still have some residue remaining, and at some consequent phase of between this life and the next life, they will attain nibbana.
Exactly. They didn't attain it during their life, but between one life and the next, the mind has experienced enlightenment.
And in the previous chapter also, I think this is described as between one life and the next.
Mm-hmm. Same thing.
Is it described differently? Because I think the way you explained it is my understanding is that you said that they will attain nibbana at death.
Yeah, that's the same thing. When we say that someone attains enlightenment at death, it's the same thing as between one life and the next.
Okay. But you also the other way also, there's also a way of attaining nibbana, like at the time of dying, like if you have completely removed all your fetters and all the 10 fetters.
Yeah, so
that's different from saying that. Yeah.
That's still between one life and the next. Because between one life and the next, it's the same thing as it can be anywhere from the moment of death all the way until the moment before there's a new birth. Or I'm sorry, between the
Yes.
moment before consciousness reaches the new name and form, the new physical body.
Okay, so all those things could happen if you completely destroyed all the 10 fetters and you attain nirvana at death, or if you don't destroy all the fetters but you destroy between one life and the next, they're all classified the same way as.
Yeah, because at death is that life is over now. So you're now have gotten to the other side of that line. So the line is death, and now if you're attaining enlightenment at death, you're just over the line. And this right here, the Buddha is drawing that big wide area from death until the consciousness would potentially reach another name and form.
So I guess my question here is then, I guess the second question would be like, how would one attain enlightenment between one life if they have not fully extinguished all the five Lord? This is the complete destruction. They haven't if they have not destroyed all the five higher fetters,
Right.
and they don't have a chance of, if they have not been born into another realm, how would they get a chance to like practice the teachings in a way that they would then
The mind.
be
Go ahead.
freed from the
Mhm.
destruction and
The mind,
attain
the mind is separate from the body, right? So you've got the body, you've got the mind, and then there's the combination of the two, and the person is training the mind. So it's the mind that needs the training. So there doesn't need to be a physical body in order for the mind to do the work,
Okay.
right? It's just like the hell being, the afflicted spirit being, the heavenly being. These beings don't have physical form. It's just the mind, it's just the consciousness. So the consciousness itself can actually do the work to be able to purge its pollutions. So let's just say, for example, a being, while they were in the human realm, eliminated the five lower fetters. And then let's just say they did all the other work, like I gave the example before, except they still have this craving for form or craving for formless. And they really want to be reborn into another life. But somewhere between one life and the next, they've eliminated it. Or they eliminate it once they land into that next life. Right? So there can be a residual amount of craving and clinging like that, where there's still a craving for existence, but it could be extinguished in between lives or as soon as you land in that new life.
But there's also things like conceit and, I mean, I guess conceit is probably the one thing that if you have in the one of the five lower or higher fetters, which seems, at least to me, that you need to practice. One will need to practice like with other like beings around to be able to know that they've actually eliminated it. It's not.
If someone has eliminated the five lower fetters, then that means the higher fetters, they've done significant work on those too. By the time they get to the point where they've eliminated the five lower fetters, they're very rarely experiencing discontentedness in that third stage of enlightenment. It's like once every 2 or 3 months, once every 6 months, they're experiencing some very minor discontentedness. So someone in the third stage of enlightenment could have actually already eliminated conceit potentially. That could have already been eliminated. That's why the example I gave you is just that they still had that one clinging to an existence, that they either were clinging to a physical existence in the form realm or the formless realm. You could have already eliminated restlessness, conceit. Of course, there would still be ignorance in the mind, but all those others could be eliminated. It could just be this one last little residual clinging that's in the mind. So the way that you might be thinking about it is your significant amount of conceit that you have in your mind. You wouldn't be able to eliminate that between one life and the next, but that's where you're at now. But if you were to eliminate all the five lower fetters, by the time you get to that point, you're going to have very minimal conceit, or maybe even no conceit in the mind at all.
Okay, so in this case, sorry, one more question here. So in this case, in the case of the higher fetters, then it's possible to eliminate conceit and restlessness before you eliminate desire for form. That means, so it's not that doesn't seem to have to be in order.
Right. Those higher fetters, they're not going to necessarily be eliminated in order. The only order there is that ignorance is going to be the last one.
Okay, so from the last time's discussion, the lower fetters are generally eliminated in order, but the higher fetters don't necessarily have to be eliminated in order.
Right.
Correct.
The lower fetters need to be eliminated before the higher fetters can be eliminated.
Right.
But that's why the
Right.
higher fetters are grouped the way that they are. It's just all 5 of those are grouped. Where if you see from stream enter to once returner, there's the Buddha showing a slow deterioration of them from one stage of enlightenment to the next. But by the time you get to this third stage, it's just the higher fetters, and now you work on eliminating all of those.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. All right, let me see if we have any other questions. I don't see any. So now we go to the last chapter for today, which is chapter 40. And this is actually the dependent origination. Let me just see here. We can study this. This is actually helpful. If you guys aren't interested in reading dependent origination, we don't need to read that. We can jump down below that. But who would like to read this one? Okay, so it looks like Samantha. Samantha, if you're not interested in reading this, you don't need to read that first part. It's really this next part, which is really unique here from what we're studying today.
Okay.
So essentially what the Buddha does
Just
is,
start with number 1.
yeah, so the Buddha talks about dependent origination, and he walks all the way through it. He talks about the elimination of all of dependent origination, and then now once he gets to the end of dependent origination, he says this.
Okay. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you run back to the past thus? We are in the past. Were we not in the past? What were we in the past? How were we in the past? Having been what did we become in the past? No, Venerable Sir. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you run forward to the future thus? Shall we be in the future? Shall we not be in the future? What shall we be in the future? How shall we be in the future? Having been what shall we become in the future? No, Venerable Sir. Knowing and seeing in this way, would you now be inwardly confused about the present thus? Am I? Am I not? What am I? How am I? Where has this being come from? Where will it go? No, Venerable Sir. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you speak thus? Our teacher is respected by us. We speak like this out of respect for our teacher. No, Venerable Sir. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you speak thus? Our ascetic says this, and so do other ascetics. It is only because of them that we say this. No, Venerable Sir. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you acknowledge another teacher? No, Venerable Sir. Monks, knowing and seeing in this way, would you return to the observances, intense debates, and superstitious rites of various ascetics and Brahmins, taking them as the most important aspects of the holy life? No, Venerable Sir. Monks, do you speak only of what you have known, seen, and understood for yourselves? Yes, Venerable Sir. Good monks, so you have been guided by me with this teaching, which is visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, onward leading, to be experienced by the wise for themselves. For it was with reference to this that it has been said, monks, this teaching is visible here and now, immediately effective, inviting inspection, onward leading, to be experienced by the wise for themselves.
Okay, thank you, ma'am. So what the Buddha does here is he basically talks about the elimination of the causes and conditions that are leading to discontentedness. He's talking about the dismantling of dependent origination. And then he goes into these questions that he asks his students saying, are you just essentially, saying these things because of, what you've heard from other people or what other people have told you and all these other things. And the Buddha's like, no. Or I'm sorry, his students are like, no. That's not why we're actually saying these things. So he's saying now that you understand dependent origination and the elimination of each of these causes and conditions that are leading to discontentedness, knowing and seeing this way, would you run to the past? Is there anything there in the past that you need to kind of address? And it's like, no. What about the future? Would you run to the future? No, wouldn't do that. In seeing this way, would you be inwardly confused about the present? No, I wouldn't be, because now you're understanding why all these things are happening in terms of how you got to this existence. Knowing and seeing this way, would you speak? Our teacher is respected by us, so that's why we speak, out of respect for our teacher, meaning like we are just agreeing with this teaching out of respect for our teacher. Is that what you would say after studying dependent origination? No, that's not what we would say. Well, would you say that knowing and seeing this way that you speak because other aesthetics, and there's a certain aesthetic that has shared this with you, and that's the reason why you say, that about this dependent origination and that you've seen it? No, it's not because of that. Well, would you be able to acknowledge another teacher and some other teacher who would be teaching? No, because they understand that this dependent origination is the truth. And now, knowing and seeing this way, would you return to observances and tense debates and superstitious rites of various aesthetics and Brahmins, thinking that those things are the most important aspects of the holy life? No. Because with dependent origination, you can see what the true goal here is to cultivate wisdom. Any rituals and ceremonies, it doesn't make sense to you after you've understood dependent origination. And now, monks, do you speak only of what you know, see, and understood for yourself? Yes. Meaning we've independently verified dependent origination for ourselves. That's the reason why they speak this way about dependent origination, knowing that this is actually the truth. So the Buddha is just walking through, confirming and making sure that they've actually independently verified this for themselves. So any questions here on this chapter, you can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or in Zoom. Okay, I don't see any questions anywhere. Okay, so I'm going to end here by thanking all of you guys for participating in class, whether you're here live on Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or whether you're watching the recording. Thank you for your interest in learning and practicing the teachings of the Buddha. Next week, we're going to be finishing up this book. We're going to be in chapters 41 through 53. You can read all the way to the end of the book, and we'll finish all that up next week. Tomorrow in our group learning program, I'm going to be in chapter 20 of volume 1. This is titled Animal to Human, the Evolution of Our Consciousness. This is where I teach about how we're shedding these animalistic instincts, becoming a better and better human being on the path to enlightenment. I teach about the 5 realms of existence, and I teach about how an individual is able to observe their past lives. So if you'd like to learn that, you can attend our group learning program for tomorrow. So again, thank you all for your dedication and diligence of learning, and perhaps I'll see you guys in a future class. Be well and take care. Sawadee.
Thank you for listening to this podcast. To provide support for this podcast, visit patreon.com/support Buddha. To access more teachings, visit buddhadailywisdom.com. There, you will discover a full range of courses, retreats, and online resources to assist you on the path to enlightenment. Remember to establish a daily, consistent meditation practice, along with learning and practicing these teachings. A well-developed meditation practice is the foundation in which to train the mind to attain enlightenment.